Nobody would have believed me, big even myself, if not for the fact that I capture each moment on camera. My experience, or rather my story, will be hard to be believed by many, but I thank God for helping me have it on camera. My name is Cal Max Curl. I grew up watching my mother work hard every single day. She had a job with the government as a postal worker. It wasn't a fancy job, but it helped us pay for food, clothes, and rent. I remember how she would wake up before the sun, pack her lunch, and leave the house while I was still in bed. Sometimes I heard the door close softly, and I knew she was gone for the day. When she came back home in the evening, she looked tired. Sometimes she had small cuts on her fingers from sorting through mail all day. But no matter how tired she always smiled at us. She would ask about our day, make dinner, and sit with us while we ate. As I got older, things got harder. My mom's salary wasn't enough. The rent kept going up, and there were always bills, electricity, water, school fees, food. It seemed like money disappeared faster than it came. One evening, she sat us down and said, "I've taken on a second job." It meant she would work extra hours at a grocery store after her shift at the post office. She would leave early in the morning and return late at night. Sometimes she didn't even have time to eat dinner with us. On weekends, she cleaned houses for extra money. There were nights she came home too tired to talk, but she never complained. My dad was a strong man. He worked as a construction worker. He earned good money, enough to take care of us, but something was missing. Dad was a hard-working man, but he had demons he couldn't fight. He drank a lot. At first, it was just a few beers after work, but over time it got worse. Some nights he came home staggering, barely able to walk. Other nights he never came home at all. I lost count of the number of times I saw Mom helping him to bed, pulling off his shoes, wiping his face with a wet cloth. Some nights she got calls from bars or strangers asking if this was her husband and if she could come get him. And it wasn't just the drinking, he had other women. I was too young to understand at first, but I remember the nights Mom sat at the table, eyes red from crying. I remember hearing her and Dad argue behind closed doors. One evening I came home from school and found Mom standing frozen in the living room. Her face was pale. She had just come back from work and found a woman in the house. I didn't understand why she stayed. People told her to leave, but she never did. Maybe she loved him too much. Maybe she hoped he would change, but he never did. No matter how many times she cried, begged, or took him to counseling, he remained the same. He was lost in his own world of drinking and chasing women. Despite everything happening with Dad, Mom never let it change the way she raised us. She made sure our home still had love, discipline, and most of all, faith. I had two sisters, one older, one younger. Mom raised us the same way. She woke us up early on Sundays for church, no matter how tired we were. She made us pray before meals and before bed. She taught us to respect people, to work hard, and to stay away from trouble. My sisters were like two versions of Mom, strong, kind, and disciplined. They saw what she went through, and instead of letting it break them, it made them determined to be better. They studied hard in school. They never went out to parties or got into trouble. Mom always warned them, stay away from boys who have no direction in life. Look for a man who fears God, who respects you, and who will be faithful. By God's grace, both my sisters married responsible men. They didn't have to go through what Mom went through. Their husbands were faithful, caring, and treated them with love. It was just another evening, nothing unusual, nothing that warned us of what was coming. Mom had finished work late as usual, tired but pushing through like she always did. She got on a bus to come home, just like she had done 1,000 times before. But this time, she never made it. The news came suddenly, a terrible accident. 5 people lost their lives. Mom was one of them. They tried to save her. Someone said she was still breathing when they pulled her out, that they rushed her to the hospital as fast as they could, but she had internal bleeding. By the time she arrived, it was too late. She was gone before the doctors could even do anything. I remember the moment we got the call. I remember the way my hands shook, the way my heart pounded so hard it hurt. Dad was silent, his face unreadable, but I knew. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before. Fear. Nothing felt real after that. It was like I was walking in a dream, but it was the kind where you never wake up. The house felt different, emptier. Her shoes were still by the door, her sweater still hanging on the chair, but she wasn't there. She would never be there again. And just like that, the strongest person I had ever known was gone. Everything changed that night. Nothing would ever be the same. Dad was never the type to show much emotion. He was tough, stubborn, and never seemed to care about anything for too long. But when Mom died, something inside him broke. He wasn't the same man anymore. At first, he tried to act normal, sitting in his usual spot at the table, staring at the TV without really watching. But the silence in the house was different now. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was heavy, like a weight pressing down on everything. I caught him sitting alone at night, just staring at nothing, his eyes red, his hands shaking. He barely spoke. He barely ate. And for the first time in my life, I saw him cry. Not just once, but over and over. It was like he didn't know how to live without her. For years, he had taken Mom for granted. She cooked his meals, cleaned up his mess, carried the weight of the family, and no matter how badly he treated her, she stayed. And now that she was gone, he finally understood what she meant to him. But it was too late. 5 days after Mom was buried, I had my first dream about her. It felt so real, like she was right there with me. She spoke to me, not in a loud voice, but softly, the way she always did when she wanted me to really listen. She talked about life, about choices, about things I didn't fully understand at the time. When I woke up, I sat on my bed, my heart pounding. It felt like she had never left. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, that maybe I was just missing her too much. But then it happened again. Sometimes it was days before I saw her, sometimes weeks. But every time, she would come with a message. Sometimes a warning, sometimes just words of comfort. She never looked sad or angry. She always had the same calm, loving expression, as if she was watching over me. Then on March 8th, 2024, something changed. That day, the weight of her loss hit me harder than ever. I wept like I hadn't in years. It felt like she had just died all over again. I tried to comfort myself, but nothing worked. It was as if she was still here, but unable to speak, unable to reach out. I couldn't explain it, but I knew. Mom still had something unfinished, something she wanted me to understand. I knew the only thing that could help me in this moment was prayer. I knelt by my bed trying to quiet my mind, asking God to take the pain away, to comfort me in the way only He could. I begged for strength, for peace, for a glimpse of hope to carry me through. I thought about Mom, how she had always prayed, how her faith had been unshakable even in the hardest times. I wanted that. I needed that. It was after my prayer, in that quiet moment of stillness, that something inside me stirred. It wasn't just the usual grief or sadness. It was a pull, an undeniable urge to go to her grave. I hadn't been there in a while, and I didn't know why. But suddenly I felt like I had to go. I needed to see her, even though I knew she wasn't there. It was like there was unfinished business, something I hadn't yet said, something I needed to do to find peace. I grabbed my phone and tripod. I wasn't sure what I was planning, but I knew I needed to be there. As I drove to the cemetery, I felt the familiar ache in my chest, but also a sense of calm, like I was doing something that would help me heal, even just a little. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew that for whatever reason, this moment was important. When I arrived at the cemetery, the quietness hit me. The world felt still, like everything was holding its breath. I walked to Mom's grave, the place where I knew I could somehow feel closer to her. It was a beautiful spot, peaceful and calm, but it felt empty without her presence. I set up my camera and tripod, not entirely sure why I felt the need to record this moment. Maybe it was so I could always remember, so I could keep a part of her with me, even when I couldn't see her. I knew I'd never forget her, but somehow, this video felt like a way to keep her alive in my heart and mind. I stood there looking at the grave, and for a second, everything seemed so real. I wanted to speak, to share everything I had been feeling, to tell her how much I missed her, how much I wished she was here. I turned the camera on, adjusting it as I prepared to record, my hands a little shaky, But I knew I had to do this for me, for her, for the memories. I couldn't stop crying. It felt like the grief I had buried deep inside was coming to the surface, too big to hide anymore. I lay down on the grave, my face pressed against the cold stone, and I cried. I cried like I hadn't in years, releasing all the pain I had been carrying. It was as if the whole world had disappeared, and it was just me and Mom again, and I needed her so badly. I took one last look at the grave, one last moment to hold on to, and whispered the words I never thought I'd have to say. "Goodbye, Mom." I stood up and turned off the camera. As I walked away, there was a part of me that felt like she was still there, like somehow she hadn't really left. I didn't know if it was just the grief talking or if she really was still with me in some way. But in that moment, I felt a sense of peace. Maybe, just maybe, I could move on, carrying her memory with me, knowing she was always going to be a part of who I was. Months passed and life continued moving forward, but the weight of Mom's absence never faded. I kept myself busy, working, and trying to adjust to a life without her. Then in February, while I was away from home for a job, something brought me back to that day at her grave. Maybe it was a memory, maybe it was the loneliness, but I suddenly felt the need to see her again, to relive that moment, to remind myself of the connection I felt that day. I remembered the video I had recorded. I had never watched it, not once, since that day. The emotions had been too raw, too painful. But now, sitting alone in my room, I took out my phone, found the file, and pressed play. At first, it was exactly as I remembered. The quiet cemetery, my voice breaking as I spoke, the uncontrollable grief that had taken over me. I watched myself sit by her grave, then lay on it, crying. The pain in my voice, the weight of my sorrow, I felt it all over again. But then something caught my eye, something I hadn't seen before. As I lay on the grave in the video, a faint figure appeared behind me. It was blurry at first, almost like a shadow, but as the seconds passed, the image became clearer. My breath caught in my throat. My hands trembled. It was her, Mom. She was standing right there behind me, looking at me with the same warmth she always had. Her expression wasn't sad. She looked calm, almost peaceful, as if she was watching over me, comforting me even when I didn't know she was there. I paused the video, rewound it, watched it again and again. It wasn't my imagination. She was there. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the video, pausing at the exact moment she appeared. No matter how many times I watched it, I couldn't believe my eyes. But deep down, I knew it was real. I had felt her presence that day, and now I had proof that she had been there. For years, I had struggled with the pain of losing her, the emptiness of knowing I would never see her again. But this changed everything. She was still here, in a way I never understood before. Maybe she had been with me all along, through every moment of sorrow, through every prayer I had whispered in the dark. I thought back to the dreams, the way I had heard her voice in my sleep, the times I had felt a warmth in my heart when I needed it most. Maybe those weren't just dreams. Maybe they were her way of letting me know she had never left. For the first time since she passed, I didn't feel alone in my grief. The pain was still there, but now so was something else. Peace. I whispered a prayer that night, thanking God for letting me see this, for allowing me to know that she was still watching over me. I asked for strength, for guidance, for the ability to move forward without feeling like I was leaving her behind. And as I closed my eyes, I felt it again. That warmth, that quiet assurance that she was near. Not in the way she used to be, not physically, but in a way that mattered just as much. She wasn't gone. She never had been. And somehow that was enough.